WBNE.
Hello, and welcome to episode 94, all about The Hobbit, Chapter 8, Flies and Spiders, being the 94th part of That's What I'm Talking About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC, and today I am joined by Brooke, Christina, and Haley of the Restricted section. Welcome, everyone.
Oh, hey, what up?
Hello.
This is a chaos episode. Buckle in, everyone.
Oh, nice.
You knew what happened when you knew what was going to happen when you brought us all on together.
I think
Yes.
it's a mischievous episode.
Yeah.
But it's always a fun time. And instead of talking about one of the most intense parts of one of the most beloved movies of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, we are instead talking about a single chapter of The Hobbit, which is arguably less dense.
And man, I love this chapter so much. I'm like, it's just so silly. Like the whole time.
Yep.
Oh, it's funny you say that because I was like, this is getting very dark and scary and spoopy.
It's like both.
It's like
Compared with the rest of The Hobbit, yes, it's definitely a bit scarier, spookier than usual.
Yeah.
But also, like, The Hobbit in general reads to me like exactly like what it is, which is just like a dad desperately trying to invent new entertaining things to tell his children at bedtime.
It's like, and then they went into the woods. What happened in the woods? There were some spiders.
Big spiders.
Yeah, spiders.
And a magic river that doesn't do anything but
Make you sleep.
put
we
you
don't
to
know.
sleep.
Oh my god. So, okay, I wanted to reread the whole book, but I didn't. It's tale as old as time.
Christina, you're being booted from the call. Sorry.
Oh, crap.
Hey, you haven't read
Except
the whole
this
book.
is your
Rude.
except this is your Zoom call, so I can't boot you from the call.
You're gonna make me reassign a new host. But I opened up to Flies and Spiders, and then I was like, let me remember, like, what happens at the end of the last chapter, and I flipped it back, and it was just Gandalf saying, goodbye then, stay on the path, you don't need me anymore, surely nothing wrong can happen. And it's like, why are you doing this?
like he did, in fairness, give them exactly one instruction. Like they had one job and it was stay on the path, and what did they not do?
Sorry, I'm having difficulties over here. What is happening? Hang on.
What is
Hang on.
happening?
It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Everything's off camera. Mary Clay's just struggling.
It's good. Yeah, Bjorn. Also, how do you guys pronounce that bear dude's name?
Like a baby Bjorn.
I always
I do Bjorn, like Bjorn Ironsides.
I always said Beorn.
Beorn, yeah.
Bjorn.
I didn't see. I read Beorn in my head, but the audiobook pronounces it Bjorn, like the baby carrier thing. And so that messes me up. And also it makes me think of Louise in Bob's Burgers when she is Jason Bjorn for Halloween.
Oh my god, so many good Halloween costumes in that show.
Anyway, but yes, their one instruction, like said to them multiple times, was do not leave the path. So as soon as that was told, I was like, someone's gonna leave the path.
Or maybe
Someone,
just everyone.
all of them.
Yeah.
Or everyone, yeah. Well, at first the direction of the book so far was like Bilbo Shire up constantly. So I
Yeah.
was like, oh, Bilbo's gonna leave the path, but they all left. Spoiler alert for this chapter, they all left the path.
Yeah, he kind of turns around his narrative in this one.
I know,
Yeah.
yeah. But also, I was very pleased when I texted y'all and was like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this chapter, Flies and Spiders, or Spiders and Flies. I don't know what it's called, actually.
Flies and
Is it
Spiders.
Flies and Spiders? Okay, great. I did read the chapter. Christina had a very exciting reaction, which at first I was like, oh no, a chapter called Flies and Spiders, it's going to be awful and terrible. So I'm glad that, like, at least Christina so far, I haven't heard from Brooke and Haley, but we will hear over the ensuing hour about whether or not you guys enjoyed it. So I'm glad it was like an enjoyable chapter somewhat.
Yeah, this was a fun one.
There aren't many Hobbit chapters that aren't fun. Like, there are definitely Lord of the Rings chapters where you're like, oh man, I
This was not
read
needed.
that. And they, double down on that for like the Silmarillion, but The Hobbit is pretty much like an enjoyable romp all the way through.
Yeah. And like one thing that I had not remembered about this chapter, and we'll get to this eventually, but like this chapter actually covers a lot of like Silmarillion stuff.
Yeah.
Like there's some Silmarillion stuff that pops up in this, but like it's explained for babies, so it's a lot easier to understand.
I'm the baby.
Yeah.
I prefer
It's
it.
me.
Yeah.
What I'm supposed to do towards the start of every episode is ask my guests their like experience with this thing. So why don't you guys tell me like what your like when did you first read or experience The Hobbit? Ooh. I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll go first because I know exactly. I was thinking about this in the run up to this episode because I was like, I know. And I read The Hobbit because I checked it out of my school's library. Power to the libraries, they're the best place on earth.
Oh my god, I love libraries.
And
I constantly want to quit my day job and become a librarian full-time. Like, I say full-time like I do it part-time now. I don't.
I'm a full-time library lover, definitely.
Same.
Like a deeply casual library goer.
Yeah.
Especially, during pandemic because you're just kind of on like a drop-off basis.
Oh, it makes me sad. Anyway, I interrupted you. You checked it out from the library.
Yeah, so I checked it out of my middle school library, and I knew nothing. At that point, the Lord of the Rings movies hadn't come out, so I hadn't seen them. So I did not know that The Hobbit that I had read and enjoyed, that had been recommended me to, a librarian recommended it to me. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is like a cool book. This is a lark. And then did not know it was in any way connected to Lord of the Rings until probably after I had read Two Towers. Like, Bilbo's name sounded familiar, and I was like, that seems odd. But I had already seen the movies, so I was like, I don't know. I mean, clearly I'm just having, like, a misplaced memory here. But yeah, I'd read The Hobbit back in maybe, like, 4th grade, and then did not know that it was part of the wider Lord of the Rings universe until probably, like, 8th grade or 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And then I reread it.
You just thought it was a coincidence that there was a guy named J.R.R. Tolkien.
I didn't think about authors at that point. I was simply too young to understand that people wrote books.
They just appeared.
Like you don't.
Side
think
note:
about it.
this is for Mary Clay editing. That sounds like a good book concept. Books that just miraculously appear in some kind of like magical library, and then the kids have to go on an adventure to discover who the author is. That's probably already been written or made into a TV show. Anyway, okay.
I mean, I feel like it's the kind of concept that you could play around with. I don't remember the first time I read The Hobbit. I remember reading it when I was 12. I don't know if that was like the first time I'd read it. I got into Lord of the Rings lore very slowly and like piecemeal over several years. So like I'd seen the movies, and I think I read The Hobbit, like I think I tried reading Fellowship, got 3 pages in and was like, this is like reading the Bible, I can't do it. Because it was just too much at the time. And I think we just already owned The Hobbit for some reason, and I just ended up reading it one day and being like, oh, this is much easier. Yeah.
I too don't remember. I've mentioned before that I read the Lord of the Rings trilogy for the first time when I was in college, and I had definitely read The Hobbit before then. I think what we're seeing here is that, like, for me, The Hobbit, when I was younger, just really blended in with a lot of the other fantasy that I was reading. Because I too, like, didn't really connect it to Lord of the Rings because I probably didn't even really know what that was. So I have no idea. I probably read it for the first time around, like 12, 13, 14. And the only picture I have drawn with my own hands in the past 5 years is an exact copy of the cover of the Del Rey mass market paperback with Gandalf walking into Bag End. Oh, also, just real quick, because I just said Bag End, I've been meaning to tell you, Mary Clay, that I named my farm in Stardew Valley Bag End.
Oh, I love it. Oh, I'm so glad that you're playing Stardew Valley.
Me too.
I got you into that.
Big Hobbit vibes.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, so isn't it funny that, like, Haley and I both, like, don't remember?
Yeah.
It just happened.
It just kind of happened.
Came to you one day.
But but I honestly like The Hobbit more than the trilogy. I love the trilogy so much,
absolutely.
but I like reading The Hobbit more.
I was gonna say, just from a perspective of like experiencing, like the actual experience of reading a book, reading Lord of the Rings is crazy people nonsense.
Yeah, I've read Lord of the Rings once all the way through, probably like a lot of it like
my God,
upon the revisit, but I've read The Hobbit probably closer to like 10 times. Like I've read it a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not much of I'm trying to think of the lot. I'm not really much of a book rereader, except for
Harry Potter.
I think Harry Potter is the only one I've ever reread, and maybe this is going to be embarrassing, and maybe a Sarah Dessen book. That
See, that's not nearly as embarrassing as my on the record on our other podcast only reread book ever, which is Twilight Eclipse, which I literally do not reread books, but I have reread Twilight Eclipse a lot.
Amazing. Oh, that reminds me, on this will come out several weeks after the fact, but on April Fool's Day I did a great prank that I thought was a great prank where I announced that I would be covering Twilight when I was done with Tolkien content, and it was going to be called Twilighten Up, which I think is, for the record, I think is a terrible name for a podcast. But I was like, I gotta come up with a pun name to really sell this joke. And I had a lot of people believe it. I had a lot of people message me on Instagram and be like, I'm so glad this was an April Fool's joke because I was about to unfollow you. And I'm like,
I thought you were going to say you had a bunch of people being like, hey, I would love to be a guest because that series is beloved to me.
I did get
that was
a lot.
my first thought. I saw it and I was like, I know this is an April Fool's prank because that's all that's getting posted today, but like I would host on that so hard.
See, that's what was funny is that I was frankly really surprised that so many people fell for it because I was like, guys, come on.
You can't believe anything today.
I have literally said I will never cover Twilight. I will never cover Twilight.
Specifically.
Flash forward 3 years when I'm using this clip to introduce the first episode of Twilight. Okay, but we are not talking about Twilight today. We are talking about
not today. Tune back in 3 years.
3 years from now. Because naturally, I mean, you think Lord of the Rings, you think J.R.R. Tolkien, and naturally, the next thing you think about is Twilight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One just leads into the next.
Exactly. So very natural connections. Anyway, this is chapter 8, Flies and Spiders. And they are entering what I can only assume is like the Forbidden Forest.
I was just about to say, Mary Claire, I would like to stop and ask you how you think this compares and contrasts to them pursuing like the spiders in the Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah, the part where they are just like being surrounded by like all these spiders, I was like, this just sounds like I was imagining the part in the Chamber of Secrets movie where Harry and Ron are running from all of Aragog's children, and I'm like, J.K. Rowling, I see what you did there. It took me, 15 years after the fact to notice, but I see what you did there now. It's very, this forest was a very different vibe than what I was expecting, because when they first mentioned Mirkwood in the previous chapter, I was like, oh, that's where Legolas lives.
Yeah, cute.
And of course, I'm also picturing, Orlando Bloom, the like dumbed down version of Legolas that they made in the movies. And so I'm like, oh, Mirkwood, it can't be that bad. And then they describe it as like being like darkness and
suffocating,
evil and chaos. And I'm like, what the hell goes on in that forest?
A lot.
Yeah, the language is so vivid. And I really do appreciate Tolkien's writing for selections like this. The way he describes the darkness that falls around them, the way he describes how even Bilbo, who lives in a hole, is feeling suffocated.
Well, and the dwarves who live underground all the time are literally like, this is a lot of underground,
this
guys.
Is too much
this
for
is
me.
a lot of dark.
Like, we're above ground, but it is, like, worse than a cave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like, it's one of those things where, like, having more context of, like, the unfinished tales and stuff kind of helps with understanding like what's going on in Mirkwood, because like there's cursed parts and there's not cursed parts. So like when they find the elves and like, oh, the lights, there's actually light here, it's kind of green and creepy, but like in a different way, as opposed to where we were with all the darkness and spiders and the black squirrels and everything was weird and gross. Like that part of the forest is like currently under a literal curse, which Gandalf is riding off to deal with, but like that doesn't really help them right now.
Yeah,
Gandalf.
the way that they enter this forest, actually, I was sitting here trying to remember what it reminds me of, but sorry that everything reminds me of Harry Potter for obvious reasons. Check out my podcast restricted section.
What?
But it reminds me of when Harry walks into the maze, the hedge maze, and like everything falls silent around him, and it's like, I thought it was daytime, but like it's dark now. You know what I mean? And it's just like it's almost like walking through a portal.
Yeah, that's a great description.
Honestly, and like the creepiest thing about this entire description is just that no matter where they go, no matter what they do, there are just eyes everywhere.
Yes. So the first like couple paragraphs of this chapter, again, that normally I make fun of Tolkien for doing this when he goes into like detailed like landscape description or whatever. But like in this case, it's very necessary for like creating this atmosphere and setting up this like setting that they are going to be in for, you know, this chapter and maybe the following couple chapters after this. And then so I was just like reading like, okay, all right, I get it. It's dark and terrible and there's no sunlight. All right, I get it. And then this was the part that I was like, I'm out. Bye. I'm done. I'm going back to the Shire. It says, well, perhaps it is not true to say that they could see nothing, they could see eyes.
Yeah. My husband...
Terrifying.
My husband has, like, described to me... It's, like, a story that he tells every, like, couple of years, you know, as, like, married couples are wont to do. But he, like, he has this story about one time that he got, like... I don't know if he was lost in a cornfield or just, like, wandering in a cornfield. And he, like, realized he could see spider eyes, like, twinkling in this way. It must have been, like, twilight. And every time he tells it, I'm like, that sounds like really fake to me. Like, I don't believe that you just realized there were eyes all around you. But reading this, I'm like, maybe it's true. I don't know. I've never been surrounded by spiders in this manner.
I think there's a big difference between hobbits and dwarves being trapped in this magical ancient forest and your husband being trapped in a cornfield.
Okay, wow, cornfields are intensely scary to me, okay?
I can't stand on the edge of a cornfield. One of my ex-boyfriends, his mom got married in kind of next to a lake, next to a giant cornfield. And I literally had to keep my back to it the whole evening because you can't look into a cornfield.
Yeah.
It stares back at you.
I think that would give me more stress because I'm just thinking of like signs, the beginning scene or whatever of signs. I would need to be looking at it to make sure that I know like what's up in there. I don't want that madness to my back.
I don't do horror movies at all, so I didn't even have like a context for it. I'm not like, oh, it's just like that movie or that thing. It's just like cornfields
are just
dark,
inherently creepy.
Incredibly dark forest full of eyes are just like creepy in a way that like unsettles you to your soul.
For what it's worth, Children of the Corn is a hilarious, deeply unscary movie. But there are many other horror films that... There are many other horror films
like,
that,
corn is
involve
just
cornfields.
Yeah, cornfields, like, they're just too big. They're too big, they're too wide, they're too tall. And, like, I mean, this...
There's also the concept, too, of, like, crop circles.
Yeah, and, like, this...
brings that in,
yeah,
too.
and this forest really does have, like, a very similar vibe, and, like, just, again, with the curse, like, there's just no... It never gets better. Like, okay, it's nighttime now, we've lit a fire, and now the fire attracts moths the size of your hand.
Yeah, that's another terrifying thing. They try to, whenever they stop for night, they're like, oh, well, let's light a fire at least. And it just attracts a bunch of bugs and bats, and they're like, this is worse. This is worse.
It's like so visceral. You can like feel the you know, like you feel like you're there in the moment. I think another interesting connection between the cornfield situation we were talking about and the forest is just like the sameness. You know, it's like almost like you ever be like driving through a tunnel with no other cars in it and you like kind of lose all concept of like depth perception because you're just like going into like another dimension. I feel like that's how it is. It's like you lose the ability to like gauge space and like therefore time because everything is just so exactly the same forever and ever and ever.
Yeah. So they are walking for several days. Their food supply and their water supply is getting low. There are a couple critters that they try to shoot. But it says they wasted so many arrows before they managed to bring one down on the path, and then it also tasted terrible. So they're just like, this is not good either way. I guess we'll just starve to death as we slowly eat our rations. Is that the word? I don't know. And they eventually come to a river of some kind, and Bjorn had told them that the water, like not to drink the water in this forest. So they also assume that they shouldn't touch the water or go swimming in it. And they are trying to figure out how to cross this place. There's a bridge, but the bridge is kind of rotted. And then for whatever reason, Bilbo develops elf eyes.
Bilbo, like, what do your elf eyes see?
He becomes exactly. He becomes the elf eyes in this situation because the situation calls for it, I guess.
I'm thinking of in the trilogy, like, every time they call on Legolas for his keen eyes, and freaking Merry and Pippa are like, I can't see anything. I don't know what you want from me.
And so he apparently has good enough eyes that he can see there's a little boat on the other side of the bank, and they throw this like grappling hook across a couple times, and they eventually hook onto the boat and they pull it across. And then I just want to point out how mean Thorin is to Bomber. And how mean everyone is to him.
Fat shaming is apparently one more thing that Rowling stole from Tolkien.
Yeah,
there are
really.
just like a lot of, they're not even like fat jokes. It's literally just like, well, I guess we could go somewhere if you weren't so fat.
Yeah, it's just like open hate towards someone being fat.
I obviously think that they're being really rude, especially when they're like, you take the last boat because you're the fattest, like, screw you. But later in this chapter, his weight does become quite a burden.
Yes, I understand that, but even when we'll get there, yeah. But they're just so, and Bomber is like, I'm tired of being last, and Thorin's like, well then don't be fat.
I mean,
it's like,
it's so mean.
Thorin also has like a dig here though, where it's like, hey, like who is best suited to like shoot, you know, basically like a grappling hook to try to get this boat across the river. And Thorin's literally like, oh, Dory's the strongest, but like Feely's the youngest and still has the best sight. And it's like, hey, you didn't have to like bring Dory into this.
You didn't have to work through it out loud.
You're strong, but you're also like old and like you can't see so good. So I'm gonna just go with anyone else. Thanks for playing.
Well, and the thing about Bomber's weight is that, like, these dwarves all live the exact same lifestyle, so obviously it's, like, a genetic issue that he, like, can't really control.
Honestly, I'm not even imagining, like, if he's been going on this adventure for, you know, however many months now they've been adventuring, it's not that, like, oh, he's fat and out of shape. I'm just imagining that he just must be, like, super muscular and beefy, is what I'm picturing.
Like a tiny Hagrid.
Aw.
Pollen, it's happening.
Bless your dear
right
heart.
now outside your door. The pollen is coming.
It's coming.
The pollen is coming.
The pollinating.
Mary Clay always making Game of Thrones references and not even knowing it.
Oh, I was thinking more of in in Deathly Hallows when Kingsley sends his. He's like, they are coming.
I got you. I was playing on Winter is Coming.
Yeah, that too. I get that.
Lots of things are coming. Just watch out.
This chapter with the whole eyesight thing did remind me that there is, in fact, a fan theory that dwarves are prone to myopia.
What is that?
Nearsightedness.
I just gestured to my glasses for those of you who can't see me.
Yeah.
As everyone except for these three.
Most people who wear glasses are, like, to some extent myopic.
Mm-hmm.
God,
and also that's like a figurative word in the English language where people are being like short-sighted. Yeah. Why are you being so myopic?
But, like, you know, it makes sense because, like, if you mostly live underground and, like, you're you know, 2 inches away from what you're working on most of the time, like, it makes sense that, like, maybe your eyes wouldn't be that great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I believe that. What I don't believe is suddenly that Bilbo has keen elf eyes.
I don't think they're keen elf eyes. I think they're just better than all of the dwarves.
Normal eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally, they're like, this forest is super dark, and Bilbo's like, hey, there's a squirrel over there, and they're like, you've got great eyesight.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, actually, the reason they established this is because in the previous chapter, after they leave Bjorn's house and they're traveling, Bilbo asks he like notices that there's this like dark shape like running past them or like prowling around them. And he's like, hey, Gandalf, is that a bear or is that Bjorn? Like, should we be concerned? And Gandalf is like, oh, you worry too much. Go to bed. And then like at the end of the chapter, Gandalf tells the dwarves, he's like, Bilbo's way more observant than any of you because he noticed that Bjorn's been following us the whole time and not one of you noticed this giant bear man hiding around the trees.
I just thought it was Sasquatch.
Like, honestly. So they get the boat and they pull it over and they take turns going back. And then right as they're pulling the boat back with Bomber, the last person, this is the part that I was kind of confused about, like, what was going on. Suddenly a deer comes running towards them, and I would take in my mind, I'm like, oh, a deer or a buck or whatever, that's, like, a very natural, like, creature to be living in the woods. I would just, like, sit there and be quiet and let them do their thing. But for some reason, they're like, it's gonna kill us and attack us.
Well, and also you can eat deer.
Well, that too.
I think the primary motivating factor, they were like, okay, option 1, this is a river guardian, and we are about to have our lives ended.
Oh my god, Princess Mononoke vibes.
Option 2, this gonna be tasty.
Maybe both.
And so as they like attack or shoot, this is the part that makes me laugh, is that like they all try shooting it, but they lose all of their, and like even when eventually Thorin is like, stop, this is useless, they've already all shot their arrows, and so that now they have no bows and arrows, and I'm like, you guys are useless.
Well, the most messed up part is that I think it's implied that they do hit it, but it's already jumped the creek, so it's on the other side and they can't get back.
Yeah, I think Thorin gets like one shot in and it lands on the other side and they hear it like stumble and fall, but they can't go back and get it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Bomber has fallen in. Oh, actually, yeah. So it also mentions, this is where also in this chapter we get a lot more of the narrator being, okay, I always struggle to say this
like
word.
The first person narrator.
It's not omnipotent.
It's omniscient.
But you know
Omniscient.
Omniscient. Yes. And he's being the narrator's being a lot more playful of like, I know this, but they don't know it yet, but I'm going to tell you, the reader, this. And he says, yet if they had known more about it and considered the meaning of the hunt and because then a white deer comes as well. If they had considered the meaning of the hunt and the white deer that had appeared upon their path, they would have known that they were at last drawing towards the eastern edge, and soon would have come, if they could have kept up their courage and their hope, to thinner trees and places where the sunlight came again. But they don't know that. So
there.
Yep.
Anyway, and so Bomber has fallen into the river, and Bilbo's just like, hey, Bomber's drowning over here.
Like, I know that deer's cool and everything, but man down.
Bomber's drowning, and they're all like, oh, it had to be the fat one. And so
Literally.
they pull him up, and the river, we don't know what it's done exactly, but it's put him into some kind of very pleasant sleep.
Yeah, a smile on his fat face as if he no longer cared for all the troubles that vexed him. Like, lucky him, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And then they become, quote, burdened with the heavy body of Bomber, which they had to carry along with them as best they could.
Yeah. They all have to take turns carrying Bomber, and then the people who aren't carrying Bomber have to carry the packs of the people who are carrying him. So they all just hate Bomber right now.
I mean, I get it. I would too. No matter how fat. If it was like a child that I had to carry, I would still be like, dude,
a child.
Honestly, stop this. Like, wake up. But it sucks that they don't have more tools, because being able to build some kind of like I'm not really sure the word I'm looking for, but
Stretcher.
like something to, like a plant. Yeah, whatever. You guys know what I'm saying. Something to carry him on would be so much easier than carrying like a limp, heavy body that is mostly apparently like fat rolls, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But they got nothing.
Yeah, they got nothing. And then eventually, as they're walking, they hear, this is when it gets creepy, because they start hearing the distant sound of laughter.
Oh my god.
I'm like,
just nightmare.
I don't know how I feel. I was like, I'm pretty sure I know that like that belongs to elves, and like I know that elves aren't, as terrifying, although I learn later, I don't know, we'll see, because apparently the wood elves are of a different kind.
Yeah,
but...
wood elves are very, like, leave me alone. They don't...
Oh yeah, which I can tell.
Yeah, they're very get off my lawn, and, like, the whole forest is... Yeah, the whole forest is their lawn.
I was gonna say, get out of my swamp.
Yeah, yep. And it says the laughter was the laughter of fair voices, not of goblins, and the singing was beautiful, but it sounded eerie and strange, and they were not comforted. And I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't be comforted either.
I love the language choice. Like, this may sound comforting, but no, actually, the opposite. Yeah.
It was very creepy. It was very terrifying. And so they're walking along, and no matter how many times the narrator has told us at this point that, like, if they had just stayed on the path, they would have soon discovered that they reached the edge of the forest and they were in sunlight again. But obviously they don't know that. And so I love this. They decide that someone's going to climb a tree and go to the top and look around and see if there's any end to the forest. And then it says, of course, somebody meant Bilbo.
Mm-hmm.
So a fun thing about the narrator, I don't know if anyone's discussed this so far, like, as you've been reading this, Mary Clay, but, like, the framing of The Hobbit after J.R.R. Tolkien decided that this was actually going to be part of, like, the whole, like, his whole boring history thing that turned into Lord of the Rings. Like, initially this was just for his kids. And then he was like, all right, well, I'm going to connect this to the rest of the story. So when he decided to do that, the framing device of The Hobbit, which had initially just been Tolkien is the narrator telling the story, it became this is Bilbo. Yeah, like, Bilbo is the narrator at this point. So, like, Bilbo is the one saying, like, of course somebody means Bilbo. Of course, like, we're close to the edge of the woods, but, like, we don't know that yet. So, like, I always love remembering that, because the narrator is so saucy in The Hobbit, and it just makes me love Bilbo so much.
Yeah,
same, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and Bilbo's really, like, finding a lot of value in himself in this book, especially in this chapter. He's like, I guess they do really need me because this is a mess.
But he's still so self-deprecating. Like, he knows that he's been useless up to this point.
It feels very
Bilbo.
British, you know?
Yes, it does.
It's like, well, needs must. I guess I'm the best we've got.
So Bilbo climbs up and he gets to the top of the trees and he looks around, and at first he's like blinded by the sunlight, but then he eventually gets used to it and he looks around and there are like tons of butterflies and there's a breeze and there's sunlight. So that all sounds amazing and beautiful. For some reason I'm imagining, I don't know, maybe it's in Tarzan or something.
I was going to say, I think it's
movie.
Avatar. Yes.
Well, I've never seen Avatar, though, so I don't know what I'm picturing. But I know that there's something from a movie that I'm imagining where someone climbs up in a forest and they, like, look out over the top and they see, like, all the beauty of like, what's before them.
That does sound Tarzan-y. It might be, honestly, now I'm like, I feel like I've seen it a couple times before.
It's probably, yeah, it's definitely.
Oh my god, it's like totally in Pocahontas, too. I don't know if they climb a tree, but they definitely go somewhere where John Smith is like, maybe I shouldn't colonize this country. And then he's like, nah, forget it. I'm just gonna do it anyway.
Well, and also, and this will be important to note for your upcoming ventures, is that it occurs in Twilight when Edward straps Bella to his back.
Hold on,
you little spider monkey.
Hold on, spider monkey.
I cannot think that in a Steve Buscemi voice at this point.
Well, I'm so sorry if everyone's confused right now.
God, what terrible movies.
Just if you're ever...
Maybe I will cover them someday.
If you're ever watching a movie and you're like, is this guy being creepy right now? Just imagine it's Steve Buscemi instead of, like, Chris Evans or whatever. And if it becomes creepy, then it's also creepy that Chris Evans is doing it. That's a Steve Buscemi test.
It is worth noting that while he's in this, like, beautiful moment of, like, wow, it's really nice up here, he's like, also, there are, like, a lot of spiders. These are small spiders, but we do see additional spiders at the top of the tree as well. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then I really disliked the way that, and maybe it's just because I can't visualize it, the way that the way that the narrator justifies here the fact that Bilbo thinks that they aren't close to the end, because apparently they're in a bowl.
So the way, yeah, so Bilbo, he looks around and he's like, oh my god, there's just endless forest all around me. There's no way out. But the way he says something like they were in a valley, or this tree was like at the edge of a valley. And so he, from the top, he only saw like what was before him. But, like, if they had been on the ground, like, in the valley or something, it would have come out because the top of the tree, like, went over the valley. Something like that.
But, like, you still would see the edge of the forest. Like, no matter how it's sloped, you would still see, hey, there are trees here, and yet not there.
Okay, well, but I'm imagining, like, imagine you're looking at a ridge line, and it's like, are there trees on the other side of that ridge line? You don't know, because you can't see past it. That's what I'm envisioning.
Yeah, it's like they're at the bottom of this valley. So he's just got trees rising up on all sides of him.
So the scholarly thing to do would be, like, at the absolute minimum, the end of the forest is right there where I can't see trees anymore. And I think that the narrator even says that, like, if he had thought about it a little harder, but he was so full of despair. Have you guys ever read, Haley, I know you have, The House of Leaves?
Yeah.
This kind of reminds me of that, the way that it just feels like time and space are, like, stretching in such weird ways, like, for the sole purpose of screwing with our characters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the dwarves, I hate this. The dwarves are, like, really grinding my gears.
Oh, they're just, like, complaining so much, and they're just,
They're
like...
such little and I'm like, why don't you do something for a change?
And they're just, like, crying, and, like, I'm thinking about when Bomber wakes back up, spoiler alert, it's just, like, crying.
They're down at the bottom, and it says that, like, their impatience is stamping with impatience, is what they said. And I'm like, why don't you go climb the tree? You know? Like, you currently are doing nothing except, like Bilbo could probably go at this point. Like, the only reason Bilbo needs the dwarves is because, like, he otherwise wouldn't have continued on it. Like the dwarves only exist at this point to, like, continue dragging Bilbo on this journey.
Yeah.
And so go ahead.
But they don't, like, I mean, the narration, this whole thing of him climbing and coming back down takes about 2 pages because it's quite challenging for him. This isn't his forte. He's not a tree hobbit. And so, like, he's just done this, like, great feat of, like, excellent physical strength when everyone is, like, super dehydrated and exhausted, and they're just like, dude, you did not bring us the information we wanted, and now we're mad, and I'm not even gonna say thank you.
He comes down and he reports, but like, also Bilbo, I can get why the dwarves are mad at him for this, because Bilbo's like, oh my god, I saw the sun and I saw butterflies.
He shouldn't have said that.
And there was, like, a beautiful breeze. It was amazing. And they're all like, well, good for you.
Dwarves, maybe... Wait, hold on. Let me go back to what Thorin said a couple pages ago. You should not be so fat. And then maybe you could climb some trees.
Yeah.
Also, like, this really uncalled for comment about, like, what is the use of sending a hobbit? Like,
yes.
you all decided that he's the only one who can climb, who can, like, fit in the upper branches. So, like, what do you want, man?
Whose fault is that? You know, exactly.
Let's go back and blame Gandalf yet again.
You know what? No, I'm not gonna. I think Gandalf made the right decision piecing out just before the forest and just being like, I'm gonna go do my own secret mission. And they're all like, what's that? And he's like, don't ask questions. Stay off the path.
His secret mission, when you learn about it, if you get more into Tolkien lore, sucked, in all fairness. But, like, also this is, like, his secret mission involved, like, a fight. This is just a slog.
Well, and the dwarf thing is, like, a side quest for him. This is, like, not a quest for the greater good, you know? Like, this is, like, a personal quest.
Well, and that's what just makes me laugh so much about Gandalf's character in The Hobbit is that, like, everything that, like, we see him do is just an amusing side quest for him, you know? Just
trying to rack up XP so he can go fight the big bads.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, you know what? Thinking about, I'm, like, so glad you like used that phrase that, like, this is a side quest for him, because now I'm thinking about The Hobbit from this, like, unique perspective of, like, what if instead of I'm just thinking of in Breath of the Wild, which has lots of side quests as well as like main quests, you know, and stuff. But like, what if instead of following Link throughout that story, you just followed a random villager, you know?
Yeah.
And like, that's essentially like what The Hobbit is instead of following, you know, a character, a like more powerful character doing the main quest.
Yeah.
You are following a side character doing a side quest.
Following the mailman from Legend of Zelda.
Yeah. And so they spend that night eating the last of their rations and food and drink. And then Bomber wakes up.
Which, like, frankly, don't even bother, dude.
Well, and that's what, yeah. Oh my God. So he wakes up and he's starving because he hasn't eaten probably in, you know, at least the dwarves and Bilbo have been eating the last couple days, even if it was like small portions. He hasn't eaten since he fell asleep. And then he's like, oh my God, I was having a beautiful dream. And again, Thorn's like, shut up. We don't want to hear about it. Like, that does sound like a great dream, but what use is it for us?
Well, because his dream was a feast.
I was just about to say I would like to mark it this time that the dream was of dinner.
And it also mentions a woodland king.
Yeah,
interesting.
definitely like enchanted
Wonder if that
dreams.
will come into play.
Yeah, probably never.
And then Thorin is mean for no reason. He says, because Bomber's like, oh, I wish I could try and describe this dream to you. And he says, you need not try. In fact, if you can't talk about something else, you had better be silent. We are quite annoyed enough with you as it is. If you hadn't waked up, we should have left you to your own idiotic dreams in the forest. You are no joke to carry, even after weeks of short commons.
Okay, wait, what does short commons mean? What is that?
It just
like little food.
Yeah.
Oh,
just limited rations.
He's like, we're basically fasting and you're still this fat.
Still fat.
Yeah.
Like, the worst part of this whole thing for Bomber is, like, he had forgotten everything that had happened since they started their journey that morning long ago. So, like, his last memory
the last thing
is,
he remembers is the party.
Yeah, like dinner
Bilbo's.
in a hobbit hole, and now he's starving in a dark
Could
forest.
you imagine?
Like, what the where the
Literally, so his dream was probably, like, him remembering the feast that was his last memory, and then, like, also, like, woodland vibes get in there. I fully support Thorin's attitude in this moment. I'd be really mad too. I don't.
But he didn't need to go in that.
No,
hard.
I never support like the fat jabs. But like, I mean, okay. Well, here's a question: do we think Thorin was pulling equal weight, so to speak, in the carrying of Bomber?
I feel like no.
It's been generally implied that, like, Thorin
know.
is too important for a lot of things.
Yeah, so that's, like, maybe if, like, one of the lesser dwarves... Well, that's not... one of the... What's the word there?
One of the others.
Side dwarves?
Yeah, one of the commoner dwarves had this outburst, I would have been like, yeah, Feely, speak up for yourself. You threw the heck out of that rope. But it's, like, Thorin, so it's, like, he's just, like, cracking under the pressure of his leadership role.
I will say I think it's especially mean considering, he, like, forgot everything. I can't believe he's as calm as he is. If you woke up in a dark wood, famished, and you're like, hey, last time I was conscious, we were somewhere very different and throwing a party. What happened?
Like, you're all grumpy with me. I'm hungry. I don't like this.
Like, I think that's a fair response
to
waking up and having no memories.
A fair reaction.
I guess what we're getting to here is that no wonder everyone is just, like, really falling apart because it's simply dire straits. Like, it's like everyone, it's like, I get it. Like, I would be behaving worse, certainly.
Yeah. I already decided that, like, technically, I don't think I ever would have left the Hobbit hole. I just like, I would still have been like, if Gandalf had showed up and been like, you're gonna be late, I would have been like, oh darn, I guess I'm late. And then I just don't leave. But in the chapter where it was Riddles in the Dark, where Bilbo wakes up and he's alone in the Goblin Tunnel, my guest and I decided that, like, us in that situation, we would have just like laid down and been like, well, I guess this is where I die.
Yeah, I'm just gonna wait for the sweet embrace of death. It's not worth it anymore.
Yeah.
We have, I think, on some other podcast. I don't know. We've
definitely been the last time you guys
really
were on.
Team
we
Try
talked
or
about
Team
Team
Die.
Try versus Team Die.
Yeah.
Because it was about Theoden towards the end of Helm's Deep.
Oh my god, Theoden!
That was it exactly. I can't believe we've come like full circle from that conversation like 5 months ago.
Theoden is Team Die, but lie and pretend to try. You know what I mean?
No, that's like every
doesn't
king.
even pretend to try at some point.
That's every king in Middle Earth except for Aragorn. Like, they're all just like, I don't want to be in charge of this. This sucks.
They're like, this seems like a lot of work. I think I'm just gonna go set myself on fire.
No, seriously, like, Theoden got put under a spell and his country was almost overrun. Thorin has to go fight a dragon. Like, it just sucks being a king in Middle Earth. You can pay me enough to be a king in Middle Earth.
It's like literally the opposite of the world of Game of Thrones, where everyone and their mom is just desperate to be king. And I mean, that's super literally.
Yes.
Oh, I get it. Incest. So, they start walking down the path again. And Bomb. This is where I will give them they are like correct to yell at Bomber in this moment where he like sits down like a toddler and starts crying and is like, I'm not going. Carry me. And they're like, we just spent the last like 4 days carrying you. Stand up and walk, or else we're just gonna leave you here to die. Which honestly, I kind of thought it was gonna go in that direction, but it didn't.
I'm surprised
eventually he does stand up.
Brought him along to begin with. Like, if he's that heavy and he's like that asleep and you don't know that he's gonna recover from that, like, I don't know, pour one out for the homie, keep on trucking.
Yeah, I know it's a, quote unquote children's book, but I keep waiting. There's so many of these dwarves. I keep waiting for like one of them to die or for like them to, because like we're getting far enough now into this adventure. Things are getting more perilous where I'm expecting for like a couple of them to maybe drop off at some point.
You really?
So when Bomber dropped into the river, I was like, oh, okay, that's it. He's gonna drown, and that's how he dies.
No,
if you had to sacrifice 2 dwarves for the sake of the quest, who are you picking off at this juncture?
Okay, well, I just really feel that you could lose almost up to like 10 dwarves before it becomes an issue. You know what I mean? Like, there's just like certainly too many, which is like part of the silliness of this book.
Like, their names all sound the same too. It's really complicated.
Yeah. I think I'll keep Gloin. I'll keep because we need Gloin so we can have Gimli. Although I think Gimli is already born at this point, so technically Gloin could go and it would be fine.
You need Philly because he's young and hot and
he's
strong.
young.
His eyes still work.
His eyes still work.
I was gonna say maybe keep one of the younger ones just because they sound fun.
I would keep
and Balin.
Yeah.
Later on, he kind of has a moment where he's better than the rest of the dwarves
For just one split second.
And then maybe Dory because he is the strongest or something. And he's had a couple. He's given Bilbo a couple quips that I'm like, that's cold but also true.
My middle school best friend's name was Dory, and I actually remember that I read this for the first time definitely in middle school because I thought it was also, I read it the year that Finding Nemo came out, I think is like what I'm realizing right now, because I had a lot of reasons to make fun of my good friend Dory.
Hey Siri,
that
what
year
did Finding Nemo come out?
Which one?
What do you mean, which one?
Finding Nemo and Children's Aquarium. Finding Nemo and Dory.
Oh,
Which
that's
one?
so funny. It brought up a children's aquarium show that involves Finding Nemo.
The miracle of technology.
Finding Nemo came out in 2003.
Okay,
Does that sound accurate?
yeah,
that you would have read it around 2003 or
Yeah,
2004?
I was definitely in middle school then. So
cool. I'm glad
it.
we've solved this mystery for you. Yeah, but other than that, I frankly don't care for Thorin. I know he's supposed to be important, but at this point in the story, he's just mean and he doesn't do a lot of things.
I definitely respect his dedication to his position, like, throughout the story. Like, he really feels a responsibility for these dwarves, even if he, like, abuses them sometimes. But he does do a lot of, like, yelling and, like, just making other people feel like they're not doing enough. He could stand to be a little bit more of, like, an Aragorn type in the inspiration department.
Yeah.
We could all stand to be a little bit more like Aragorn,
Absolutely.
you know?
And then the other thing is, like, I can't again, like, it's hard, especially, like, I don't really remember the Hobbit movies except for just, like, the blind rage, but I remember what the characters look like, and Thorin is by far the hottest dwarf, so that's
absolutely incorrect.
What, really?
Yeah, I think it was.
See, this is what is just so wild to me about the concept for the movies. Because, like, aside from maybe a couple, like, posters or, like, random movie clips, I really haven't seen anything of it besides
the one Bilbo meme every day.
Bilbo.
The first one was okay. The first one was okay.
Oh my god, whatever. We'll come back to talk about those too.
The hottest dwarf is Keeley, by the way.
I knew you were going to say that because he's a New Zealand actor.
So when people talk about the dwarves being hot, that is just nonsense to me because I'm also, like, the way they're described in the book is very different from how they are imagined on screen.
Oh yeah, Hollywood, glam.
And I'm, just going off of what I know from how they designed Gimli for the movies. I would never, Brooke, I know you have different feelings about that, but I would never describe Gimli as hot. So I'm interested to see what happens with these dwarves.
Like, the way they designed Glowin in the movie, like, there's definitely a family resemblance, but, like, the two younger dwarves, like, all of the younger dwarves are kind of hot. Like, Thorin's pretty hot. I'm partial to Beaufort's character.
Me uncomfortable.
Okay, oh my god, we will certainly come back on to discuss
Yeah, we're gonna have
exactly
to
which
come back
dwarf
to
is the hottest one.
We'll do a special episode.
Yeah, like,
it won't even be a segment of the movie. It'll just be which dwarf is the
we'll
hottest.
rank them.
But, like, making them all look so distinct, because, like, they're very homogenous in the book. It's like they all have, like, either a silver or gold belt and a long beard and different color
Honestly,
hoods.
we'll discuss some of that in this chapter, too, about how, like, they do kind of all, like, I couldn't whenever I try and name all of them, I get to about 10 or 11.
Yeah. And, like, the movie makes it easier to tell them all apart.
Yeah.
There's a point in this chapter where Bilbo is running around and calling all of the dwarves' names out, and it sounds like a nonsense nursery rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because it's Dory, Nori, Ori, Oin, Gloin, Feely, Keely, Bomber, Beefer, Bofer, Dwellin, Balin, and Thorin, Oak, and Shield.
Just put that underneath it.
Thank you for getting that stuck in my head, Mary Clay. It's been
You're welcome.
At least 20 years, but all right.
Is that the Six Flags? Is that
yes,
maybe?
I mean, it was definitely a song.
It's an actual song, isn't it?
Yeah, but then they
Six
just
Flags
made
apparently just used it.
Yeah,
that's what happens when you sign your rights
So,
away.
in this chapter, they are nowhere near a Six Flags.
Well, but imagine if they just stumbled onto it.
Unfortunately for them.
like, how wild would that be? Like, because this is around
turn
the
the
time
corner.
they start to see, like, feasts happening in the woods. What if they just, like, saw, like, a roller coaster whiz by in the background?
That's nuts.
Wait, that literally reminds me of hiking in certain places in Richmond. Like, you can hike in downtown Richmond, like, a 6-mile loop, and then there's...
What, and see the Eiffel Tower
No,
at King's
but
Dominion?
then there's just like a highway, and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not in the middle of the woods.
Oh, the
like
woods.
I'm in
Oh,
like
okay,
a
yeah.
I'm in like a quarter-mile strip. Of
I don't know
woods.
why I was imagining that there's... I don't know why I was thinking that there was a mountain peak high enough in Richmond that you can see the Eiffel Tower in King's Dominion.
I mean, surely. I mean, I'm no Hobbit. My eyesight is just not nearly that good.
Yeah. Okay, so as they have continued on their journey after Bomber wakes up, they notice that off to the left of the path, in the midst of the forest, they see some lights, and they're imagining, Christina's putting her face in her book, and they're
So
like,
disappointing.
we don't even care what the lights mean, because the last time they saw lights in the distance, it was trolls. So they are like, we don't care if it means danger. It could also mean food. And someone's like, but we're not supposed to leave the path. We could die. And someone's like, we're not going to live. Like, we need to get food. Otherwise, we're not going to live long enough to keep walking down the path. So what does it matter? And then it says, so they all left the path and plunged into the forest together.
You
And
had
that's when, like,
one job.
one job. That's what I wrote down in my notes. It's just, you had one job. And that's actually where we're going to leave it for this week. Like I should have predicted when I got Christina, Brooke, Haley, and I all in the same call, we talked for way longer than is one episode length. So this will be a 2-parter. And we are just going to leave it on this very intense cliffhanger of, ooh, I wonder what happens when they leave the path. I'm sure it's fine. You can find all of us on the restricted section together. And I believe this week actually is the episode that Tyler of Bacon and Eggs / WB&E will also be on as a guest. So that's very exciting. So many crossover events happening. So you can find all of us on the restricted section, and I will leave links to all of their social medias in the episode description. That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WB&E. You can learn more about the network by going to wbne.org, where you will find all of our shows like Sincerely Us.
Dear listener, today's going to be a good day, and here's why.
Because today we have found your new favorite podcast.
Do you like all things musical theater?
Or do you just like Hamilton?
Then Sincerely Us is perfect for you.
We take deep dives into modern musicals and teach you all that you need to know.
From props and sets
to playwrights and composers,
we will get you caught up on all things Broadway.
We are Becca and Eni, 2 best friends,
here to teach you all about the shows that we love.
Sincerely Us, a podcast for the casual musical theater fan.
Join us every Wednesday wherever you get your podcasts and on wbne.org.
The cover art is by Graphite, aka Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at graphite.vmb. You can get merch for That's What I'm Talking About by going to tpublic.com/user/talkingaboutpod or following the link in the episode description. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at talkingaboutpod, and you can also join the Facebook group, which is again linked in the episode description. You can find me on Twitter at MCWhatsup and Instagram at MCTurndownForWhat. If you want to support the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/talkingaboutpod and explore the different tiers and perks. You can join the WB&E Discord for $3 a month. That's a good tier to join. Or you can become a sponsor like Zach. Zach, you are a new patron for That's What I'm Talking About. Thank you so much for joining the ranks and for supporting this dumb little Lord of the Rings show that I do. And I appreciate your support very much. Oh, I have to sign off this week. Shoot, I always forget that. Whenever I do these 2-parters, I have to sign off by myself on the first part. And I all of a sudden understand the pressure that I put my guests under when I say, do you have any parting words for the audience? And they're like, stay on the path. And then I go, and that's what I'm talking about. See what I did there?